Welcome everybody to the fourth expert clinic of the collaborative on the use of administrative data. This expert clinic will be focused on engagement with data owners. The collaborative is a joint initiative of the United Nations Statistics Division and the Global Partnership for Sustainable Development Data that have convened a multi-stakeholder collaborative of countries and regional and international agencies aim to strengthen the capacity of countries to use administrative data for statistical purposes. Well, the collaborative is a platform to share resources, to share tools, to share best practices and experiences. And the aim is to contribute to raise awareness among all the members of the national statistical systems about the benefits of sharing and combining administrative sources to enhance the quality, timeliness, coverage, and the level of disaggregation of statistical data. The expert clinics are organized by the collaborative and its members. The focus of each of the clinics is defined by the needs specified by the members of the collaborative. And the purpose of each clinic is the exchange of experiences to inspire each other and to find solutions together. The experts that are invited to the exchange are coming from within the statistical community and do not receive remuneration for their participation. So we would like to express our gratitude to all of them for their contribution and engagement with the collaborative. Today, the expert clinic is devoted to the engagement with the data owners, as this is one of the key issues national statistical offices are facing today, how to engage with those institutions, departments, and agencies producing administrative data so it can be used for statistical purposes. Palestine has kindly developed some questions that serve to guide this clinic, and these are the following. What are the main challenges and obstacles that prevent effective coordination at the level of the national statistical system, and what are the most prominent effects that may result from loose coordination at the level of the national statistical system? How can we contribute to the global, regional, national levels in the work related to coordination in the national statistical system? And third, in addition to a sound legal framework, what mechanisms can be adopted to improve the process of data supervision and communication with national data sources as a whole? And today, in this clinic, we have the participation of experts from Palestine, from Vanuatu, the UK, and Ghana, and they will share their experience with us. More concretely, we have Mr. Issam Al-Khatib from the Palestinian Central Bureau of Statistics, Mr. Hugo Pigot from the Vanuatu National Statistical Office, Mr. Joseph Crisper from the Office for National Statistics in the UK, and Mr. Emmanuel Opoku Ado from the Ghana Statistical Service. Mr. Issam Al-Khatib is the partner director at PCDS, and he has more than 24 years of experience in the field of statistics, youth, labor market, good governance, management, and communication statistics. He worked in the past with UNDP, CIDA, and he directed several censuses and worked in different departments inside PCDS. He holds a master from the Al-Quds University, bachelor degree in sociology and political science, and a higher diploma in applied statistics. Hugo Pigot is strategic advisor based at the Vanuatu National Statistical Office. Hugo works to tackle important global policy areas and to monitor progress towards the Sustainable Development Goals. He has supported governments for over 5 years to identify system needs, provide strategic and technical advice, and develop capacity to modernize official statistics. Joseph Crispell is senior data scientist at the Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office Data Science Hub, a branch of the National Office for Statistics Science Campus. The hub works to extend the use of novel data sources and methods in the campus in the UK context into the international development sector with a combination of research and development projects and data science capacity building through mentoring and training. And finally, Emmanuel is coordinator of civil registration and vital statistics at the Ghana Statistical Service. He collaborates very often with civil society organizations and municipal districts and assemblies to progressively work on the sustainable development goals under the civic registration and vital statistics. So without delays, we will start with intervention from Mr. Isam from the Palestinian Central Bureau of Statistics. So Mr. Isam, the floor is yours.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning.
Good morning. You can go ahead.
It's okay, the sound? You hearing me?
Yes. Yes, thank you.
First of all, dear Martino, I thank you to this chance to let us talk about the admin data. And I have beside me Mr. Maher Sbeh, and here and Nafir. As you know, we want to talk about what is the admin records. It's all data which come from private and public sector that collected or recorded for various administrative purposes related to those institutions, such as registration of birth, death, building, license, registration of cars, land, establishment, weather condition, and extra of things which collected from the ministers or institutions. About the establishment of administrative record in the BCPS, the discussions about admin records started early when BCPS started the work. And our comprehensive plan for building Palestinian official statistics include the needs to integrate the source from the Palestinian statistics system, include admin records, survey, and census. This, and we focus all the time about the admin data. This because this data offer us and reduce, for example, the cost, guarantee for us high respondent from the people which we meet to collect the data from the surveys. Because sometimes, as you know, some people or families or establishment not yes, have a small response from it's because the secret of data or something like this. The significant role of administrative record in national statistics system. Why the admin data is important. This is an important source for statistical system as it's the third element of building the official statistics system in addition to the survey and census. And as we see now in the Corona time, all countries focusing to develop the admin data records because the survey and census have element. There are hard condition to collect the data from the field. So it's very important to focus in the admin data. Highly reduce the increasing burden of on respondent in the survey and census, as I mentioned before, and reducing the expenses and obtain data comprehensive, including quality, quantity, and geographical coverage. In this slide, we want to talk about the efforts made by BCBS, Palestinian Central Bureau of Statistics, to advance admin data record. We signing a memorandum of understanding with the partners, ministers, and institutions in Palestine, assisting ministers in developing registration forms, where the time have a meeting or workshops to work on these things. Obtaining coordinators as focal point with ministers. We have coordinators in all ministries to deal with them about the admin data. Establishing national and technical committees to promote records, linking and evaluating records data with survey and census sources to be sure that the data comes from records, it's good and we can publish it. Training and developing the statistical units in the ministries that are producing data. And all the time you're focusing that all ministers and institutions which produce the data have unit, especially working in the statistical issue. Holding workshops and developing studies on administration records. For example, we have every 2 or 3 years survey. We conducting a survey to be sure that all things in the ministers and institution is good. Opening communication channels with ministers that produce data. As I mentioned before, all the time we have a meeting and visits to those sources. Aspect of cooperation. I talk about the MOUs. We signed more than 44 memorandum of understanding with our partners. And this MOUs include details how we can deal together to guarantee that the data producing from them and flow the data with BCBS. Joint technical work team to accomplish common tasks. Implementation of joint statistical activities, developing partners database. Meeting the partners' needs in terms of training and qualifying their skills in various statistical aspects. Programming models record. Now we will talk about the 3 questions. The first question about the challenge and obstacles. The lack of standardized methodologies and definitions. Sometimes we found that some ministries or institutions use different methodologies and definitions, and we think it's affect negatively the statistical number, and we can't comparing between the national and international numbers. Lack of experience. and complete in the producing statistical data. And all the time we're working to develop the people or workers working in this field. The need to strengthen our coordination between the BCBS and the data sources. The need to enhance the joint work between BCBS and data sources. Lack of data covering all required details. Difficulty obtaining details data sometimes due to the confidently of the data, and as you know, we need sometime all the time the details, and it's not enough to get the main indicators. Sometimes we need the sub indicators for each indicator, and for the secret things. Sometimes we can get this details from the ministers or the second question, how we can contribute in the group, in the effective communication network of specialists in administrative records, availability of standard evidence related to administrative record that include concept, instruction, and mechanism for collecting and circulating administrative data record. The need of comprehensive and continuous training program that show that effectively of workers in the field of administrative record. As you know, the background of those work in the ministries and institution is not a statistical background, and all the time we work to that some people work in this field have a statistical background. Ensure the flow of information and data with different channels through the meeting, through the internet, emails, and database. Disseminating and sharing of national, regional, and international experience among partners. Sometimes if we have a meeting or workshops from international partners, we invite the people who work in admin data from different ministries to know what happened and get some experience. The last question about the mechanisms can be adopted to improve the process. Ensuring that the legal framework is existing, and through this framework we can access and use the admin data, because without this framework we can't connecting and deal with the partners, and sometimes we have a problem with this issue. Conduct a comparative analysis of concepts, definitions, and classification used in admin data, and as mentioned before, it's sometimes also we have a problem in this issue, because some of them use different definitions, classifications. Recognize the degree of coverage of admin data and predictably identify the used coding with their activities and categories such as professions, economic activities, and others. And that we want to be sure that it's and unified. Consultation with data procedures. This means that all the time we should be in connecting with the partners. Publishing high quality data in special bulletin or within the outputs of statistical program. That means that we use this data and not just we collect it from the partners. integration of administrative record data into official statistical database to use them in the future and when we need it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Isam, for your contribution. Now, I would like to give the floor to Hugo Pigot from the Vanuatu National Statistical Office. Please, Hugo.
Perfect. Thank you. Am I going to share the screen or are you, Martino? Sorry.
You can share your screen. I kindly ask Isam to stop sharing the screen so Hugo can take the floor.
Sorry.
Okay. Just a moment.
No problem.
Still sharing. I can't.
Yeah, just a moment. You have a button at the bottom of the screen should be a green button, share screen. Yes, please, Hugo, you have now rights.
Okay, fantastic, perfect, thank you. Okay. Morning, everyone. Just talking in and around sort of good governance and evidence-based decision-making in Vanuatu and sort of coordination national statistical system. Just going to take some small aspects which I think are working quite well in the case of Vanuatu. Now, when we talk about the national statistical system, again, main aim, we're looking at good governance and evidence-based decision-making. But what is it that we actually discussed in here? And I think some of the things which are certainly working in Vanuatu and we're focusing on sort of individual and organizational benefit. How does the individual benefit from what we're doing and how does the organization benefit from what we're doing? And so when we think of these as sort of the challenges, which I'm sure are challenges which are similar for everyone, sort of limited financial resources, lack of capacity and overburdened staff, I would say one of the key aspects of that is overburdened staff. Now, from engagement, I would say you generally don't meet staff that are unwilling to help. It's more that they are too busy to help. So what can we do to reduce the burden of staff? What can we do to improve sort of individual organization and system level capacity? And how can this help drive demand in data? And this will lead to increased financial resources once we start to prove what we're doing has impact and is of benefit. And then looking at sort of the system focus is creating mechanisms for interaction, both informal and formal. Now, one of the aspects we've been focusing on in Vanuatu is looking at sort of how data science can be integrated into administrative data systems. We have one initiative, Joe will touch on later, looking at reproducible analytical pipelines, the sort of mentorship program. And one of the things it's allowed us to do, if we take the international trades, for example, it's allowed us to completely go through all our classification system, map out all the processes, and then write code over the top to automate all these processes. And so when we sit down with someone from trade statistics, when we have that initial engagement of someone that hasn't had too much support over the last few years, and we have that initial conversation, what you're able to say is, look, if we can work together, at the end of this, we can reduce your workload by about 90%. And so from this will allow you to do more engagement with stakeholders. We can do further analysis to make the information more relevant for them. And this, I think, gets immediate buy-in, not only from the NSO, but also from stakeholders. And one of the impacts of this was that we recently had a launch with the Minister of Finance and British High Commissioner. And after this launch, the Minister of Finance asked for information on trade, and this information was used to debate in Parliament to gazette a bill to increase import duties on products related to non-communicable diseases. Another initiative is we're looking at the National Sustainable Development Plan, which is the highest policy framework. It's a sort of localized SDG. And this is built upon the Open SDG indicator tracking platform. And again, we've had a mentorship program to develop this, but one of the key aspects of this was the amount of engagement that we've done in collecting all the information and again, harmonizing it. And sort of, because there's so many silos of administrative data within the national fiscal system, it's been able to get that information together and make it open and accessible to everyone, and trying to tell a story of that information. And when I say tell a story, this is what comes down to sort of organizational individual benefit. If I take two examples, one, we've been working with education. We've been given direct access to the educational database, but one of the things we've said to them is we will analyze the data, we'll make it open and available, and now we can start to look at enrollment, we can start to look at grades, and we can start to look at scholarship programs where government invests into which sectors for children to go to higher education. And then we can start to compare that information to the labour market. So we can start to tell a really good story of human resource development within the country and what this potentially leads to. And again, it goes back to this idea of what is the individual benefit and what's the institutional benefit, and how can what we're doing drive demand and investment for data. Another initiative that we have that is very close to being finalized, I wouldn't say it's finalized yet, but the idea of trying to use machine learning. We have an agricultural census coming up, is to try and use machine learning from ground truth data from the agricultural census to be able to replicate indicators. Now, the main focus of this is that product will be integrated into the Ministry of Agriculture's administrative data system. And what that will do, that will increase coverage, because we do not have the human resources to go and speak to every farmer in the country on a regular basis. But what we can do is we can estimate potentially all farmers and use individuals to quality check that information, which then taps into the administrative data system. So again, it's just trying to tap in and use sort of data science and technology to improve the processes, to get that individual benefit and improve the organization. And sort of looking at the impact of these initiatives, sort of enhancing individual organization system level capacity, reducing the burden of staff, which I think is absolutely key, and potentially increasing financial resources through improved statistical literacy. Now, one of the key aspects, I think, from our engagement is looking at the differences between informal and formal engagement. I mean, I'll touch on a few things. Myself, I actually prefer informal engagement. I think it's more difficult to measure. It's much easier to be able to say, we met everyone in a workshop, but generally trying to get all the right people in the room for formal engagement is often difficult. And sometimes I find it's easier sometimes just to sometimes turn up to someone's office, wait a couple of minutes and speak to someone. But one of the ways we're trying to really engage is with stakeholders is through building statistical capacity of Parliament. And so by engaging with different ministries about collecting their information, about taking this information and this information being fed back to their minister, I think this is a way that has developed a lot of buy-in into what we're doing. And so we've had a few sort of formal engagements around that. We had a briefing session with the Minister of Finance and 5 selective MPs. One of the outcomes from that initial engagement was they said they would convene the Council of Ministers session specifically for the NSO, which has never happened before. The Council of Ministers is the highest level of decision-making in the country, which is sort of a fantastic outcome. And then the informal engagement, sort of really just sort of informal ad hoc meetings, catch-ups. I mean, we will meet with certain directors and certain DGs on a bi-weekly or not bi-weekly, sorry, bi-monthly basis, just to have a catch-up. And I think, again, it's something that's difficult to measure, but I think in terms of sort of long-term relationship building, informal engagement is really, really key. And then sort of how data science has enabled us for this sort of effective engagement is it's reduced the burden of staff. We had a recent business planning for next year, And those that have been involved in research analytical pipelines, because their workload has been reduced by sort of up to 90%, it was agreed in the business plan for next year that they would go and do presentations to their key ministries a couple of times a year on information that is relevant to them. So our trade statistician will go and do presentations to Aid for Trade Department and External Trade Department. And it's developing that sort of relationship, I think, is really, really key for sort of engagement and building a national statistical system. And increasing capacity to produce high quality and impactful products to stimulate engagement. So this open SDG and sort of integrated machine learning into administrative data system, I think having that sort of final product that is your main aim and allows that sort of stimulation of engagement. So I think that would be it for myself. And then if it's okay, I'll hand over to Joe.
Please, Joe from the Office for National Statistics of the UK. The floor is yours, Joe.
Great. Thanks very much, everyone. Hopefully you can see my screen okay. So I wanted to follow on from Hugo and explain a little bit about what our role in building capacity in the Vanuatu National Statistics Office was, and just speak more generally about how we see these efforts aligning with this goal of engaging with data owners. So a little bit about the hub. So we're based within the UK government's Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office, and we're a little bit strange in that we're split between the Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office and the Office for National Statistics Data Science Campus. And the reason for that is that in the Data Science Campus, we're sort of thinking about novel data and data science methods and applying them in the UK context. Whereas by embedding this hub within the Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office, we're taking that same aim, but thinking about it in the international development space. And that work comes in three streams. We've got research and development projects where we're trying to apply data science techniques to meet particular needs within and develop tools within the international development space. We've got data science training, so we have lecturers within our team, and their aim is to work with organizations to understand their needs and develop and use training resources to address those needs. And then similar to the training, we have mentoring, and these are more long-term efforts to build reproducible data science capacity in organizations around the world, such as the Vanuatu National Stats Office. And so our mentoring, we really work with organizations all over the world, and generally those will be statistics offices in different governments. And our overarching aim is about building capacity. And as Hugo has really nicely highlighted, we see that as an opportunity to really improve the ways that we are gathering and processing and analyzing and presenting data using data science techniques. And then by doing so, really allow more access and accessibility to the data sources that all of these amazing organizations are producing. So Vanuatu is not alone in that. Statistics offices around the world are producing a massive amount of really high quality data. So by building capacity in data science techniques, part of that is enabling those organizations to use those data. Often what we find is that there's a huge amount of effort into the reporting and making sure that we're meeting our indicators, but that leaves little time to really leverage these data sets and see what we can learn from them. But by building up data science capacity, teaching about these data science methods that can help to automate and replicate our processes, which are often manual. As Hugo has highlighted, that often frees up a huge amount of time, which can then be redirected into engaging with users, thinking about how we can use these data more, how we can make these data more accessible, and also thinking about how we process the data. Are there ways that we can improve that process? So we're really by integrating data science techniques into those processes, we're hoping to sort of change the way that we work with data all around organizations. And while our focus is on the international development space, we have very similar work going on here in the UK government too. This isn't something that is going on outside of the UK. There are projects and teams working in the UK government that really benefit from understanding how data science can be used to improve the ways that they're working. So this is, while our focus is internationally, there are similar efforts going on across the UK government that are seeing massive benefits as well because of these techniques allowing us to improve the ways that we're working with data. And in sort of thinking about this presentation, I kind of thought of 4 different themes about how the data science capacity building that we're doing helps us to engage with data owners. So firstly, it's about being open and transparent. A lot of our processes here in the UK government and in many organizations, they are opaque, they are difficult to understand, they're often even difficult to replicate. But by encouraging open source, using open source tools and open source standards and documenting what we're doing, we can be more open and transparent. And that enables us to be clear about how we're producing our reporting. And that, in turn, which we'll touch on, helps us to build trust with our users and helps them to be a part of the process of developing our outputs. And I've mentioned access and accessibility. So in my mind, I'm thinking about those in 2 different ways. We've got the data science tools themselves, so open source programming languages like R and Python, and tools for helping us to collaborate like Git and GitHub. They're really improving the ways that we can access our own data and others' data. They're enabling us to be able to access in an automated way a massive wealth of data. So having the opportunity to access both our own data and others' data and bring those together and think about how they can be used alongside one another rather than independently is really going to improve the analyses and the processes that we can do. But then also thinking about accessibility, it's about the data that we have and how we present it in our reporting. So often that can be in quite dense tables, which it's great, and those are really useful for being able to track indicators, but it doesn't necessarily make that data particularly accessible. And when we develop and we input all of our sort of massive amounts of resources into gathering these high quality data sets, what's really important to think about, okay, well, how can we use them? And accessibility is key there. And there's lots of data science techniques that we can use to improve the ways that our data can be accessed. So that's thinking about how can we make our visualizations more accessible? How can we use things like APIs to allow others to access our data? And how can we protect our data users in that process? So lots of really important things to consider, but data science and data science capacity building can really help us to improve that accessibility. And I've mentioned here open source a lot. By being open and transparent and presenting the work that we're doing using tools like GitHub, which we've seen be really successful in the Vanuatu National Stats Office, helps us to promote good practice. There's a wealth of resources out there that tell us how we can structure our projects, how we can write good and accessible code that others can go on and develop. The SDG indicator is a really great example of that, where that's a tool that's now being used and adapted in all sorts of different countries because it's been developed in a way with that in mind, being a general tool that can be easily adapted and improved. And that's about promoting good practice, and that's a really key part of the mentoring that we do. And then lastly, I've touched on this as well. by being open, by being transparent, by making our data accessible and open to others to use it, we're building up a community and we're building up trust. And that means that we can continue to improve the ways that we're gathering, analyzing, and presenting our data. And we have a user base that understands our process, not just is able to access what we're producing, but it understands how our indicators are being generated, and also has the opportunity to dive into our processes in more detail if they want to understand that further. So this is how we sort of see data science capacity building as a tool for improving the ways that we can really leverage the massive amount of really high quality data that statistics offices around the world are producing. And I'll finish there, but hopefully that gives you a flavor of the type of work that we're doing. And we're always interested in identifying new mentoring opportunities. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Joe, for this interesting presentation. Now I will give the floor to Mr. Emmanuel Opokuado from the Ghana Statistical Service. Please, Emmanuel, the floor is yours.
Yeah, hello. Thank you, Marino, and good morning, afternoon, evening to all. The Act of the Ghana Statistical Service at 1103 gave us this function of services. And I read from Article 4, to achieve its object, the service shall to achieve its object, the service shall provide leadership and direction for efficient, consistent, and comprehensive collection, processing, analysis, documentation, and storage of statistical information within the National Statistical System. And the C is to determine the manner in which the ministries, departments, agencies, district assemblies, and statutory bodies collaborate with the service in the collection, compilation, and publication of statistical information, including statistics derived from the activities of those entities. Ghana, at the back of the National Strategy for Development of Statistics, GSS is implementing the Harmonizing and Improving Statistics for West African project. And this is what we are doing. We are working with 12 line ministries to improve their administrative data. We had a virtual meeting with them to tell them what we are going to do, the processes and things that they will need. And everything is purely under administrative data. So the first thing we did when we had the virtual meeting with the 12 MDAs, that's the municipal departments and agencies, we asked them to list all the agencies under them and submit to GSS. After they have submitted this, in another virtual meeting, we asked them to identify all the administrative data units within the ministries that comes under the agency that they are operating. And we also asked them, after identifying the agencies, they must come out with the product of each agency that is working under them. And the third thing we asked them to do is to map up every agency with the products that they produce. We had an in-person meeting with the focal persons, and then we try to finalize the data products that the agencies working under the line ministries have. Previously, before this meeting, we asked them to have their own TORs. So in that meeting, we refined and adapt the TORs for the ministries. We also asked them to bring along their templates. So in that meeting, they came up with their templates. And then we asked them to look at their templates because we need to look at the concepts and definition of all the variables that they are collecting as an administrative data. So in another meeting held with the ministries, what we do is we don't bring them all together, all the 12 ministries together, but each of the ministries comes with a group of people, the focal persons that they have selected in all the administrative data units of the agencies. So we sat down with them and then we looked through their concepts and definitions. And we standardize their concepts and definitions so that whatever they are collecting will have a data, the data will be of quality. And after this thing has been done, because they are technical men, we ask them to take them to their management. So the management will look at it. And then we later held a meeting with their management so that they will understand what we are doing. That is not the only thing we did. We need to look at their capacity to be able to come out with the administrative data. We look at their skills, their statistical infrastructure. If they lack laptops or whatever that may impede their work, then it means under the harmonization and improvement of statistics in West Africa project, then they need to purchase laptops for that ministry so that they will be able to produce their administrative data. And we also look at how the data will flow so that there will not be anything that will hamper the work they are doing. And this is an example of one of the ministries that we took them through how to go through their data templates, doing it on their own. So we can see in some of the pictures, they are sitting down together, the photographs, trying to look at their definitions and concepts before we align them. We have the DHIM, that's the DIMS, which is under the Ministry of Health. That's the District Health Information Management. And in Ghana, it's not all the health facilities that reports to them. Those under the tertiary institutions do not report to them. So what we are doing is to give a national coverage. We invite all of them to come together. This also happens under the IMIS, that is the Education Management and Information System. If it's not all education institutions that report to the IMIS, so with this HISWAP, we are able to bring them together so that we'll have a unique data coverage system. And this is an opportunity for us because we think that the Vice President is also interested in having a reliable population dynamics at any time. And as we know, if your birth, death, and migration, data from birth, death, and migration is okay, at any time T, you will be able to determine the number of people in the country. So in some of the meetings we held with some of the stakeholders, we agreed that the Ghana Health Service, when a birth occurred in the Ghana Health Service, there are some variables that they are going to give to the birth and death registry. And these variables that will give to the birth and death registry, the birth and death registry will also forward some variables to the National Health Insurance Authority and also to the National Identification Authority. Whilst the birth and death goes on to identify and locate where that birth has occurred to register the new birth. And after, the National Identification Authority will also issue an ID to the newborn child. And if it's death that has occurred, the Ghana Health Service will record all death that has happened in their facility. We also have the Ghana Police Service, which goes to record all death that has happened outside the health facility. That is road accidents and unnatural deaths. Any death that occurs outside the country will also be covered by the Ghana Immigration Service. And all this will also be forwarded to the Birth and Death Registry for registration. And the Birth and Death Registry will forward all this information or data to the National Identification Authority for update records. All these things does not come without challenges in the administrative data system. So some of the challenges identified is that some ministries are still having data on hard copies, and storage is a problem. And some of the fields are left blank and incoherent. And because it's an administrative data, the data is not disaggregated. And this is also a challenge. We recommend that if any country or administration want to go through what we are doing here in Ghana, then they must have some resources available to support, because administrative data is not meant for statistical purpose. So if you don't have any resources to support going through all these things, as we did with the line ministries, you must have some resources there, which is going to help you to achieve whatever you need to do. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Emmanuel, for your intervention. Well, now we close this formal expert clinic, this formal part of the expert clinic. Thank you very much again to all the participants for being here today with us and sharing your experience. And now we start the informal exchange. So Emmanuel, if you could please stop sharing the screen. I would like to first somehow summarize some key points that I have seen interesting in the exchange we have had. The first is the interesting idea that the COVID-19 has shown even more the importance of administrative data due to the difficulties in getting data from surveys. It was really something very difficult to reach people face to face, and so conducting surveys and censuses was really difficult during COVID. So indeed, the use of administrative records is easier during these exceptional circumstances. And from the different participation, we saw that there is a challenge in harmonization of concepts, definitions, and classifications. We see this is a big challenge. And another interesting thing that even if the contexts are very different, but it is important to use the data, not only to collect the administrative data. To use the data is very important, it's key. To publish it, to save some time to do it is not easy. We know that as colleagues from Vanuatu and UK mentioned, people is overburdened. They don't have time to process the data, to think about the use of the data. And unfortunately, because this is a key element. And talking of this overburden of the people, it was interesting, the idea that also is somehow in the, we lost Emmanuel.
Yeah, I think he's been having connection issues.
Okay, because it was already as well behind his presentation, the issue of the people, the key is people, and improving the overburden of the people, improving the working knowledge and the tools people is using, you improve the system. So the idea of this connection between people and the organization is very interesting. And another thing is the powerful of building the capacity, formal and informally, through mentoring programs to improve at the end the organization and finally on the longer term the system itself. And it was very interesting as well the idea of through open and transparency, we improve access and accessibility. This is something very interesting. How being having an approach to open to use open and open data and open source tools, we can improve the access and the accessibility. So I now will somehow make some questions to the participants, and then after you can yourself engage in asking questions or whatever you would like to know more about the presentations. But starting with Palestine, Isam, he mentioned one interesting thing that other as well Emmanuel mentioned about the problem with standards, classifications, and definitions when it comes to how some of the land ministries, for example, collect their data. It can be that the Ministry of Education or the Ministry of Labor do collect data on enrollment, which does not correspond to the international classification. So how, at the end, how can we compare this data with the region where the country belongs to or the international standard. How do you in Palestine address this issue? Do you somehow try to force the line ministers or to convince the line ministers to use the international classifications, or you just receive the information from them, you try to recode, or you try to somehow work with what you receive from them? Isam?
Yes, Martin, with you. As I mentioned, all the time we have cooperation with the ministries and the sources. So we want to guarantee that they use the same classification and definition, because without this, we can't compare the data which collected by BCBS and which collected from the sources, and we at all we can't compare it with the international data, and we can't publish it. So all the time we working to be sure that they use the same classification. For example, the Ministry of Education should be used the same classification for the education level. ISCO, I think ISCO, and the Ministry of Labor that should use the classification for the professional on and economic activities. And to guarantee this, and we make some training for the workers who work in this field to be sure that they use the same classification. But sometimes for special issue, they use special classification or definitions, and we put them in our account when we publish the data. As you know, there are a national classification or definitions sometimes for each country. And we noted that when publish the data, that it's related to this classification or definitions.
Thank you.
I answered the question, Martino.
Yes, you did. It's always a big deal to somehow have the possibility to that all the providers use the very same classifications, and it takes some time and some effort from the National Statistical Office to somehow support them in using these international standards and international definitions.
Yes.
Just
I want to add something. We are working with a government institution. There are published a huge data or numbers about the announcement which published from the government, and it's very important. There are used published without any standardized things and not related to the statistics. Now we work with them to be sure that all things or numbers published related to statistical things, and we build with them the database similar with that we can compare these numbers with the national and international numbers.
Okay, thank you. One question to the colleagues from Vanuatu and UK, maybe two questions. One following up on this issue of harmonization and classifications and definitions. How do you deal with this from the data science perspective? is how can you ensure this? Do you try to do it at the somehow at the from the source, or do you recode at the level of the office to harmonize things? So you basically receive things whatever format you can take them and then you recode, or do you try to as well make that the source of the data produces the data in using this and the same classifications and definitions, international classifications and definitions? And another question is about the legislation. To what extent do you have challenges in legislation to use the tools and the power of data science to somehow improve the use of administrative data and leverage on the work of the individuals?
Joe, maybe do you want me to have a go quickly and then maybe you follow on, or is that okay? Okay. Also, as well, I'd probably like just to quickly say, Emmanuel, how are you?
Hi. Fine, thank you.
Charlie, I've been waiting 2 years to say this. Charlie! How are you?
Oh, nice meeting you.
Really good to see you. In Ghana, you say Charlie for friend. We used to work, myself and Emmanuel used to work together. So it's good to see him. Okay, so now I have to quite remember what those questions were. So I would say
classifications and legislation.
Classifications and legislation. I would say, again, maybe Joe would feel differently. I would say that my understanding would be that data science can be used to take the information and adapt it through things like, I suppose, API, but actually changing it at source would take a level of interaction and sitting down, which would be a sort of prerequisite to the data science. I don't think, I think data science would be, in my opinion, would be a useful aspect, but I don't think it would be able to completely take over the sort of mapping process. I think it can help to streamline it. In terms of the legislation, I think there's certainly data sources which are more confidential. There's a program ongoing in Ghana, which I was helping to support, looking at telecom data. But I would say that from the Vanuatu's perspective, we're really trying to look at open and available information, and sort of and try and move on. I mean, it's sustainable. We can't pay for high resolution satellite imagery on a regular basis. We can only try and use it to the benefit sort of what's free and open and available anyway. And in terms of the administrative data, as far as sort of the mandate from the institution and legislation supporting our mandate, it enables us to access that information. And I think you will always have, I've never known any national statistical office to fine department in government because they haven't adhered to the legislation. I think things sometimes go wrong, and it's not necessarily that there aren't necessarily consequences to it. But I would say the legislation gives the institution the mandate, but I'd say more importantly, as far as getting access to administrative data and making it open and available, I'd go back to what I initially said was, what is the benefit to them? And that should always be the first question before any engagement, in my opinion. What is the benefit to them? And I think for me, from Vanuatu's perspective, it's certainly something we're focused on. And it takes longer. It does take longer. But that is, yeah, I would say the legislation supports us. But we're really sort of using it to make information more open and available. Sorry, Joe.
No, thanks for that, Hugo. And I'm inclined to agree on the classification side. I think classifications are difficult. And what I think data science brings to that is the opportunity to streamline where possible. So a lot of the work that we do around classifications and merging in different types of classifications, we can replicate those processes using open source tools. That mean that as long as we've clearly mapped what we're doing, then we can replicate that, and that's an automated process instead of that being something that is done manually once a month or once every 6 months or once a year. And there are massive benefits to that. So that's a simple application of data science, but as soon as you can automate and replicate that process using a simple open source workflow, you're removing a lot of the error that might be introduced through doing that in a manual way. So as Hugo said, there's real potential for streamlining, and I guess one of the sort of themes about data science is being open and transparent and using open source tools, and part of that is making sure that we provide our data in a standard form. So it's about encouraging using standard classifications that are being used globally rather than introducing our own or introducing new types, because the sort of myriad of classification out there makes it very difficult. So it's about consolidating, and UN obviously is doing a lot of great work in that space. And then the other part of it is just having standards in the way that we work. So documenting when we change things, why we change things, and what we've changed and how we've done it, and doing that in an automated way so that those changes are going to be the same every time we workflow. So coming back to that streamlining. But on the other side of it, there is potential for data science techniques to really improve the ways that we code and classify data. We've got these existing classifications that we can almost see as training data sets, which we can then feed into machine learning approaches that can learn how to classify our data. And that means that going forward, we can feed in new data and automatically classify it, whether that's like imports and exports based on types of commodity. We've got those classification tables, and we can take them forward and apply novel techniques like machine learning to automate that coding process further. And there's also more simple approaches where we can just put in checks and make sure that as we're processing the data, we just have in automated checks that say, oh, this doesn't look like we've used the right classification, maybe it's been input incorrectly. And while that means that there will be some manual checking, it's much more efficient. Instead of reading through 10,000 records and saying, oh, there's some missing ones, we immediately say, okay, well, 100 of these look like they might be wrong, but go back and check with the data owners. So it's really important that in all these processes, we're always going to have a person there. But data science can really help us to streamline those processes and make sure that we're using that person's time as efficiently as possible. And there are some novel techniques that we can use to improve the ways that we're coding and classifying. On the legislation side, this is a really critical consideration. I mean, it's the way that we present data. While it is important to be open and provide these data, we also have to keep in mind those data subjects and make sure that we're protecting them in how we're providing data and also how others are going to be using it. And to me, you've got kind of two aspects. You've got the data ethics considerations and making sure that you're considering what these data are, who are our data subjects, how did they envisage the data would be used, and how are others going to use it, and how can these data be used in the context of other data sources, and are there risks that we need to think about there. So really investing time in thinking about that with each of the data sets that we have is really important, and then that can feed into what legislation is appropriate for the data sources that we have. But then, as Hugo was alluding to, it's really about promoting and demonstrating what we can do with these data sets. So at the moment, we and this is true very much in the UK context, we are on the side of caution. we start from a private perspective, and we start by not sharing, and that's really a barrier to progress. And if we instead we are on the side of we'll share it, but we will carefully consider what the implications of that are, and we will clearly document that process. I think that's a really important next step. And part of that is saying, yes, it's really important that we recognize the implications and risks associated with these data, but also highlighting what we can do with these data. How can we really benefit from them, and then feeding that back to our original data subjects and making sure that they're aware and part of the discussion. So yeah, two really interesting questions that I think raise more questions that you've used lead to fruitful discussions. Thanks.
Thank you, Joe. And last question to Emmanuel, and then you might engage as well yourselves in discussions. But from your presentation, it was you started with legislation actually. So like legislation is empowering you to empowering, and at the same time asking you to improve the use of administrative data for statistical purposes. So then after legislation, you go to the people, actually, to these 12 ministries, and then meet the different units and work with the different units. What lessons you learn from this working with the people? Do they understand the need to improve their daily work in order to meet this overall objective of improving the use of administrative data for statistical purposes? Did you encounter opposition from the managers? Because maybe these people have already too many things on the table. Don't bother me, National Statistical Office, with this training, because we do have already our staff overburdened. What was the challenge in building this relation, engaging with these units, with these people in the units?
Thank you, Martino. Well, even before this law was passed, what we were doing is we work together, go to the ministries, and then we collaborate with them, and they understand us. So after this law was passed, it became even easier meeting them and then discussing with them how we all need to use administrative data for policy making. We had a buy-in. They all support the idea, because with the harmonization and improving statistics in West African project, what it entails is we will look at their skills and their infrastructure. If they have a problem and they need some computers, that project need to supply them, so that there wouldn't be any problem for them producing the administrative data. Thank you.
Sorry, thank you very much, Emmanuel. It's interesting to me that no one talk about metadata.
Yeah, sorry. In fact, during our meeting, our workshops, what we were doing is we'll invite one ministry, feed them through, and then we'll ask them that we teach them how to prepare metadata. So we took them through all this. Sorry, I didn't mention it in my presentation.
No, it was something very interesting to me, because metadata is somehow key, but the important thing is the people. You all focus on the people and on the ministries. But
maybe I didn't mention it because I was thinking more about Google.
I would say as well, just also, we only had 8 minutes. We only had 8 minutes.
now you can mention it. So what about metadata? What is does the data owners understand the importance of metadata? Do they produce metadata, or how it is in the different contexts, the work with the data owners in relation to the metadata to understand what they share with you? Anyone?
I mean, I suppose I'll touch on it briefly. Before, I would say from previous understanding of engagements, I would say generally people have no understanding of metadata. I would say that you usually admin data is an Excel spreadsheet with various column headers. I'm not quite sure specifically the thought process that has been put into that, and often those column headers are often developed by donor partners that have helped sort of establish the database. So I'd say there isn't really an understanding of metadata from the engagements that I've certainly had. I would say that sort of harmonizing ideas of classifications across different departments and sort of definitions is extremely difficult because different departments have different wants. I mean, I take the context of a household in Vanuatu. A household is defined by the NSO as something different to what a household will be defined as the Ministry of Health. Or we have different administrative data boundaries, looking at sort of area councils and provinces, and education uses different administrative data boundaries. And so sometimes it's very difficult to sort of talk about the population because they have a different boundary to what we have. So I'd say that there has to be some sort of discussion about sort of integration and choosing. I mean, national ID is another one, I suppose. Some sort of integration, but it's also, I suppose it's a difficult point that has to be negotiated, because also have to take into consideration that what the National Statistical Office does is different to what the different departments do. So it's sort of having that conversation and that negotiation and trying to find some sort of common ground, I suppose. Sorry.
Thank you. Any other one would like to touch upon this?
Yes, in our case, when we started with the metadata explaining to them, initially they did not see the need for it. But when we gave, I suppose, how useful metadata is, they all bought into it, and they saw that it is very important because you need to explain the methodology you used, the data and everything, how you were able to calculate indicators and levels. So this how useful it is to have data on every.
We are having troubles with your connection. Maybe you can disconnect the camera. Sorry, Manuel.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So initially they did not understand the use of metadata, but on explaining to them and giving examples for the usefulness of it. Thank you.
Well, it looks like we lost Manuel. Now I open the floor for your own comments, questions. If you want to touch upon something, please, the floor is yours. Also for you, Celia.
I'd ask a question to Martina and Celia, if that's okay.
Maybe.
No.
Go ahead.
I'd be interested just to hear from what you think the point is of administrative data, and not just, I mean, from the understanding of what administrative data is supposed to lead to. You know, what decisions is it supposed to lead to, and how will this information be used? Sort of what is it that we're sort of the classifications, the metadata, the training, what is it that we're trying to get to at the end?
Well, for me, when we talk about classifications, metadata, particularly metadata, when we talk about this in relation to engagement with data owners and to foster the use of administrative data for statistical purposes, it is somehow tricky, because these terms are used widely by the national statistical offices, but it is not always understood what it is meant by the data providers. Line ministries, as you mentioned it, they might have an Excel sheet and all the data there, and it's already something. And they don't have very clear, many times, the definitions, because they might even not have created these definitions. They have inherited from donors or projects or whatever. And sometimes I see that the national statistical offices, when they ask collaboration, or when they try to engage with data owners, they also want to have the metadata, and they might even force them to, or convince them to use concrete templates for filling in the metadata and so on, and spend a lot of time convincing and training the people to use this. The extent to which this work on metadata can, in some occasions, this the fact that they are speaking a different language might be negative for the exchange of data, because they don't, because the line ministries in many occasions don't want to change the way they store their data, don't want to bother about metadata and so on. So I think each country, each context, and even in the different sectors, they have to find, national statistical offices have to find a balance whether to work with the data providers on metadata to improve the way they collect the data, to change the way they collect the data providers collect the data. In some of the contexts, in some of the sectors, it might be worth just getting what the data providers have in whatever format they have, and try to understand what this data mean without changing the way they collect the data, or without asking more from them on metadata. This is why I wanted to ask about metadata, how you approach, how the different national statistical offices approach metadata, because I have seen that for some, it is a kind of must. Together with the data, we have to receive the metadata in the format that we normally use it. For others, it is not important. Just get the data is the key, and then we will slightly improve the work on the metadata, or just try to make sense of the data once it is here. This is mainly my own opinion.
I jump in just on a maybe because you asked about this whole administrative data, what's the point, and where do we want to, why do we talk about it at all? And ideally I would say it's what you said, to have better and faster data for decision making, and to give something back to the data owners that they can use, because I just know that there are some of the countries that I've been working in. I mean, most of the information that's needed is collected through surveys, and it's now I'm sitting in Namibia, and it's a huge country. There are not so many financial resources and not so many people, and a lot of things are registered, but not every ministry is aware of what's actually registered. So there is a huge potential to maybe cut down on some of the surveys. I don't say it should replace in the long run everything, but just to have a really good additional source of information that, I guess, if you engage in dialogue with the different ministries and show, like you did with the Ministry of Trade, what's actually possible, or what can be made available if you work together and solve all these, of course, complicated issues with metadata and classifications. But I think if there is a willingness to engage in this dialogue, there is a lot of potential to get out of it in terms of having better data faster. That's a very not so detailed answer.
Thank you both.
Any other question or comment you would like to make?
I have a question. If nobody else, I don't want to take so much, but I really like the point on the informal and formal engagement. And I was curious because you mentioned it explicitly, Hugo, but about the others as well, what your experiences are in Palestine. And I know a little bit about Ghana, of course, because we've been engaging quite a bit, but how much of the dialogue is taking the shape of formal meetings, and how much work did you have to do behind the scenes to actually get people to show up and create agreement and those kinds of things? Do I need to say I would like to hear from? Yes. So Isam, if you could share a bit on that, how much you actually have informal meetings as well, or if this is something you've not been practicing as much as Hugo said. Yeah.
For example, in the beginning of 1990, we planned to visit all the sources and make a meeting with them. But we did around 15 meetings, and we not continue because of the some conditions. Sometimes to make this meeting or visits, it's take a long time. It depend of your work. Your schedule is full, and the others there are a full schedule. So sometimes it's take a long time, but we have sometimes we have a solution to conduct those people by email, by phone. It's very easy, and it's very easy things that to make meeting with separated meeting with one or two ministers. It's very easy, and the very useful way to collect or to invite 10 or 15 ministers or institutions to workshop and repeat this workshop with the others. I think it's we made this things, and it's very useful. About the you asked about the memorandum of understanding agreement.
Was that for me or? Yes, but yeah, I think it was not so much, but the MOUs are quite formal, I guess. So you have the meetings and then the formal agreements. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
And before you agree on the MOUs, would you have a lot of meetings with the ministries, to agree on what's in it and so on, or would you present them the MOU with the content and then see what they say?
For sure, it's need some dialogue, some visits, some calls, some emails. Each other, we have a copy, and we resend the copies. There are comments from the partners from us, but sometimes week, 10 days, it will be finished, and we have a date for the two ministries to sign the agreement with the high level, as you know, the minister from our side and the minister of their sides. But it's easy and to make it, not for a long time, but in the end it finished with 2 weeks maximum.
Thank you.
But I think that we have a problem with the agreement. Sometimes we feel it's like just something written. I mean, it's not conducted in the ground, It's like something to take a photo and we finished.
And then
because after we signed the agreement, the purpose of the main goal to sign the agreement, to make the work after that very easy. So if I need to conduct the coordinator from the ex-ministry, that my demand should be take day or hours, not month or 2 weeks. So we can inject that the agreement, it's not very useful or to make our work is easy. It's not for all our resources. Some of them we face this problem with them.
Yeah, this is an interesting point. Formal agreements are interesting, and in the case of memorandum of understanding, these are not binding. They are formal agreements at the top level, but they are not binding legally. So you need, in any case, the more informal relation that might be the key to reduce the time from 2 months to 1 day to ask for data from them and receive it quite quickly. A very interesting case. Thank you. Do you have any other question or comment from your side, Manuel or Joe or Hugo, Isam?
No question from my end.
Isam, I don't know if you are talking, but you are mute.
Just want to our colleague Joseph talk about in the slide about data science to engage with owners, about the tools for access and accessibility. If I want to know more about the tools, because the tools is very important to make the work of the admin data easy, but the tools is not everything. I want to know more about the tools they used, or if Joseph available to.
Yeah, absolutely. I can come in. So when I say tools, I'm talking quite generally, and I mean essentially open source programming tools. So predominantly we use R and Python, where R is designed for statistical analyses and visualizations, and then Python is a slightly broader tool. Now they are of them rather than sort of considering them as tools in their own right. But alongside those, for data access, you might also be implementing and building APIs or application programming interfaces, where you're essentially creating a portal for others to be able to access your data, but in a programmatic way. And the advantage of that then is that others using tools like R and Python, as well as other programming languages, will be able to access those easily, but you're also controlling how they access it and what types of information they can access. On the accessibility side, R and Python really have a wealth of resources and tools that you can use to make your data more accessible. So that can be around visualizations, having interactive visualizations that allows the users to sort of explore the data in more depth, which go beyond the sort of tables that we generally present admin data in. And that can also be tools for users to explore the data as well. So as well as creating programmatic interfaces like APIs, you can also create tools for users using R and Python that would allow people without that programming background to access your data and explore and learn from it. So it's not really a great answer, because I would say using open source tools is the way to go for that. But they are in Python and programming in general, they're massive. They can be used in essentially every sort of data science application, every way that we use and explore data. But what I would encourage is sort of thinking about how you would like to either make your data accessible or access other data, and then reach out to organizations or explore some of the resources online about how you could use open source tools for that. And you'll find that someone somewhere is using R and Python, and a lot of the work that we do in the hub is where people have an established process that they'd like to think about how data science could be used. That's where we come in and teach them about these open source tools and help them to use them for their processes, which then becomes tools for accessibility. I hope that was a useful.
Thank you. In Palestine, we have a good job in this year that we produced with cooperation with UNSD, two experts. We produced like a handbook or a guide. It's contain all process and tools how to deal and collecting the data from admin records, especially for the SDGs. And now it's available, and it's in Arabic also. So maybe, and the good thing in this job that we invited all our partners from the Palestinian resources, and they participation in the discussions and dialogue with the two experts, and they add all the comments and we get from them all the feedback about how we produce this handbook.
Thank you, Isa. Thank you, Joe. Any other comment or intervention?
Can I very quickly ask Joe, for the dashboard you showed, did you also ask the Ministry of Trade what they need, or how did you choose which information to show to them?
So that's a really good question. So, and it's one probably that Hugo can answer better than me, because the dashboard was built by Rara, who works really closely with Hugo and who we've been working with in the Vanuatu National Stats Office. But more generally, ideally, yes, yeah, anything that we develop, we sort of develop with the user in mind. Without doing that, you often end up down a rabbit hole. But yeah, so as I understand it, and I'll pass to Hugo, Rara did a lot of work and reaching out to the different types of users, and that's something that, in particular in Vanuatu, has meant that the work that they're doing is really impactful. But I'll let Hugo come in.
Perfect, thanks. So, I mean, all I would add to that is, yes, Rara and the team, they've spoken in depth with Department of External Trade and Department for Aid for Trade about what exactly they wanted in order to design the dashboard. I'd say for the report as well, what has been enabled through reproducible analytical pipelines is that previously we only ever had time to produce information that met the international requirements, which I think is 14 standard tables. And then you were doing analysis around that. But the international standards was not necessarily relevant for Vanuatu needs. So now what we've been enabled to do is we're now looking at things, there's a huge problem with NCDs in the Pacific. We're looking at commodities related to NCDs. We're looking at imports that should be substituted. And one of the big things that have come from the dashboard is what sometimes is difficult to do in a table or in a report is actually sort of a look at how a number of variables interact. So you can start to look at what commodity, for instance, I don't know, coconut, what commodity, we report on that as a commodity, and then we report on countries, we report on them separately. But the dashboard allows us to look at what commodity goes where, what export goes where, and how much it's worth, and the volume, and also the import, what commodity comes from which country. And this allows us to, and we're starting to analyze and look at, understand our trade agreements and sort of who's actually benefiting from these trade agreements and sort of what commodities are driving these trade agreements, and also how we can establish new trade agreements too. So understanding all these different wants, but it does come down to the fact that we wouldn't be able to do this unless we had reduced and streamlined the processes using data science. But because we have been able to do that, we're now being able to produce statistics, which is much, much more relevant to Vanuatu needs.
Thank you. Very good point. Very interesting how at the end policy making can be highly beneficial from this streamlined situation. Any other question or comment? If not, I know for Hugo has been quite a big deal to be with us. It's a little bit late there, so I would like to thank you, all of you, for your participation, particularly Hugo, but really thank you very much for being today with us. I hope you have enjoyed the clinic as much as I did, and we keep in touch. Thank you very much.
Yeah, Martin, just we waiting from you the materials, the presentations, the result of these discussions, yes. Please.
You will. I will send you it's not the best time in the year to this because we have to process the videos.
Take your time.
We will take some time, and probably in January we will send the links to the webpage of the collaborative, and you will find all the videos there.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, and have a good night, afternoon. Bye bye.